All right, here's a very well-known video used by every teacher educator I know just about that talks about adult misconceptions. Um, I hope the video, sound, and image sync up here. If not, please try to understand.
To test how a lifetime of education affects our understanding of science, we asked these recent graduates some simple questions in astronomy. Consider, for example, that the causes of the seasons is a topic taught in every standard curriculum.
Okay, I think the seasons happen because as the Earth travels around the sun, it gets nearer to the sun, which produces warmer weather, and gets farther away, which produces colder weather, and hence the seasons.
How hot it is or how cold it is at any given time of the year has to do with the closeness of the Earth to the sun during the seasonal periods.
The Earth goes around the sun, and it gets hotter when we get closer to the sun, and it gets colder when we get farther away from the sun.
These graduates, like many of us, think of the Earth's orbit as a highly exaggerated ellipse, even though the Earth's orbit is very nearly circular, with distance producing virtually no effect on the seasons. We carry with us the strong, incorrect belief that changing distance is responsible for the seasons.
I took physics, planetary motion, and relativity, and electromagnetism and waves.
I've never really had a scientific background whatsoever, and I got through school without having it. I've gotten very far without having it.
I had quite a bit of science in high school, through physics, first year, and 2 years of chemistry.
Regardless of their science education, 21 of the 23 randomly selected students, faculty, and alumni of Harvard University revealed misconceptions when asked to explain either the seasons or the phases of the moon.
When it's further away from the sun, then it gets colder.
The Earth's position interferes with the reflection of the sun against the moon.
All right, so these adults have big misconceptions about what causes the seasons, taught in maybe third grade. And this misconceptions that they have contradicts other conceptions they have, like it's summer in the southern hemisphere and it's winter in the northern hemisphere. So it couldn't possibly make sense that the Earth is both farther and closer to the sun at a certain time of year. And this image that they will draw, this high elliptical image, is completely incorrect, and yet they retain the misunderstanding. Why? Because according to this idea that Glaserfeld is attributing to Piaget, these two misconceptions are not causing disequilibrium for them because it's not conflicting with any agenda that they have. All right, so let me just change this from the science to more subjective kind of thoughts. So we all know that there are different political perspectives, and there are people that believe in one perspective or another. And it's not uncommon for somebody who, let's say, is on one side of the political perspective to come across information that completely contradicts and may even throw serious doubt into their beliefs. And yet the response is not to have doubt, but to recommit to the beliefs, right? And the same would be true on the other side. Both sides of the political spectrum this can happen to. Why would that be? Well, this theory would explain that the person is getting a benefit from their beliefs, and their beliefs are guided by that benefit. Maybe it's reinforcing some values. Maybe it's part of a group identification. But the person is not driven to try to resolve discrepancies, but they're driven to believe in the thing that they want to believe in because it's serving some other purpose, right? So this brings us back to constructivism and this phrase that you'll hear: children are active constructors of knowledge. But I think this is often then reverted back to a passive kind of idea. When we start saying, well, let's use constructivist methods, as if the teacher can come up with a method that will cause the child to learn, now putting the child back in a passive role. So do teachers arrange experiences to activate learning and then children learn? Or do the children have a say in this as well? Like maybe say, well, I just don't want to learn. Okay, the child has its head down on the desk. I think anybody could agree with that. But a different kind of thing is the child wants to learn, but wants to learn in a way that they, or ideas that they are going to believe in. And you might tell them X, Y, and Z, and they'll say, yes, I've learned that, A, B, and C. The child has a will in the learning process that can't be explained just by what the teacher is doing from a constructivist perspective. So, does this concept of children having will, maybe you would call it free will, I would prefer to call it will, fit with your beliefs generally about human beings? And just to bring it back to one of the connections we had made earlier, what does it say about Scheffler and Danielson? Where Danielson is describing all the behaviors of a teacher and what they're going to do to produce learning. Whereas Scheffler is saying, well, just do what's reasonable to accomplish an intended goal. If you're a constructivist, which of these are you more likely to believe in? All right, so let's go back to, I just not go back to, but go to the biggest picture of all. This is going to be quite a leap, but maybe some of you are starting to ask these questions, so I'm going to make this big leap now and say constructivism actually has more to do not just with what we believe about learning, but more about our very broadest beliefs about truth. So, first, are children and adults seeking the truth? Are we all in this process, which I think there's this idea that many of us have, that as human beings, over time, individually and as a greater society, over time, are we in a process of trying to get closer and closer match between what's in our heads, what our beliefs are, and what is actually true in the real world? Or are we so guided by our own will in our conceptions of truth, or our conceptions about what we believe about the world, that we are inevitably all going to have different ideas about the world in ways that can never be resolved? And the biggest question of all, that constructivists, true constructivists, pure constructivists, will even go so far as to say there is no such thing as the real world, because what we consider to be the real world is only our idea of the real world, which is something that we have constructed ourselves. All right, so that's a lot to digest, and I hope will cause you to say, you know what, I don't know if I agree with that or not, but I recognize that this idea about constructivism may be different than some of the ideas I had about constructivism, or some of the other ideas I have about learning than I've had in the past. All right, looking forward to the discussion.